investigation, always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. You are listening to part 2 of The Dark Days of Dryden, New York. If you haven't listened to part 1, I would go back and do that now before continuing on with this episode. In today's episode, we are going to now talk about the case of Aliza May Bush and the horrific murder of Stephen Starr. This is episode 59, The Dark Days of Dryden, New York, part 2. As always, listener discretion is advised. When we left off in part 1 of The Dark Days of Dryden, New York, we talked about the murder of the Harris family just a few days before Christmas. It is now February 2nd, 1990. 911 receives a phone call from a frantic mother stating that her 2-year-old daughter just walked out of their home and she cannot find her. In this quiet, close-knit town of Dryden, New York, where everyone knew each other by name and life moved at a steady, predictable pace, something strange was going on. With 2 unspeakable crimes happening one after the other, the locals would start referring to this as the curse of Dryden. Something strange had shattered this peaceful, calm town. The news of Aliza May Bush's disappearance spread like wildfire, igniting fear and suspicion in parents, neighbors, and friends who once felt safe behind their white picket fences. It all happened so suddenly that no one could quite believe it. One moment, little Aliza May Bush had been in her home with her mother, and then the next, she's gone. Whispers, rumors are filling every corner of this town. Was it someone from within the community? Was it an outsider who slipped in? Was it the same person that killed the 4 members of the Harris family? People in this small community once left their doors unlocked, but now everyone was scared. An innocent family murdered, and now only months later, a 2-year-old girl is just gone without a trace. According to a New York Times article, Aliza May Bush disappeared about 7:30 a.m. on February 2nd, 1990. This was shortly after she and her mother finished walking their dog. They returned to their basement apartment in Lansing, which is about 4 miles north of Ithaca, New York. Christine Lane, who was suffering from the flu, then went to the bathroom briefly and discovered that her daughter Aliza was gone. The front door was open, but the dog was still in the house. Christine rushed outside, but she didn't see Aliza. All she could see was one of Aliza's mittens just sitting at the end of the driveway. At first, investigators believed that Aliza had just wandered away, but a 4-day search led by state forest rangers did not turn up any evidence at all that she had wandered into the woods. The entire community helped in this search. I'm talking days and days of people searching every inch of Dryden for any kind of clue as to where Aliza could be. The entire community dedicated their time, their effort. Their hearts were with Christine. Obviously, investigators have to rule out every single possibility, so they're going to have to investigate the parents, which were Christine Lane and Gregory Bush. Gregory was Christine's estranged boyfriend. But the investigators soon find out that Gregory and Christine had a pretty good relationship. They were great at co-parenting, and there was no sort of custody battle going on. They gave Christine and Gregory a lie detector test, and both passed. At the time, Christine was also dating a man named Kevin, so investigators bring Kevin in for a lie detector test, and Kevin also passes. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, it is very rare for a child to be abducted by a stranger. Although thousands of children disappear in the United States each year, most run away or they are taken by a non-custodial parent. Investigators start to believe that this case is very unusual. And what made the case so unusual is that Christine received one mitten in the mail. It is very unusual for this kind of communication, especially so soon after the abduction. It had only been about 4 days since Aliza went missing, and Christine already received some form of communication in the mail. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, of the almost 900 cases the center has recorded since 1984 in which a child was abducted by a stranger, only one time has a kidnapper communicated with the parents. Police agree that this mitten seemed theatrical, was the word they used. Something just seemed a bit off about Christine. And although she's going on television and crying her eyes out, it almost feels like she's acting. On television, she's hysterical, she's crying. But during the interviews with police in the interrogation room, she's not crying at all. They notice that she's giving the emotions of someone that is upset, but no tears are coming out. February 8th, 1990, while being interviewed by the police, Christine messes up. In earlier statements, Christine told the police that she was in the bathroom sick, and that is when Aliza must have disappeared out the front door. But now she says that Aliza must have disappeared when Christine went to take the trash out and left the door open. At this point in the investigation, tips are coming in to the police department, and they are coming in fast. A store clerk in a local store in town said that she saw Christine mail a package. This witness says that the package was the same exact package that they showed her, the one that Christine received the mitten in. When police confront Christine with the information from the eyewitness, Christine is going to break. A second polygraph test is administered to Christine. She fails this polygraph test, and then she admits to police what happened. She tells them that she found Aliza like this. She says that Aliza suffocated in her sleep, and she didn't know what to do. According to court documents, after a second polygraph test was administered to defendant on February 15, 1990, she changed her story and reported to the examiner that about 4 a.m. on February 2, 1990, she had gone into the victim's bedroom after falling asleep in the living room and found the victim face down in her crib, tangled in her blankets. The defendant said that the victim was cold, stiff, and not breathing, and that her efforts to resuscitate the victim were fruitless. She also tried to call an ambulance, but hung up, fearing that she would not be believed. Thereafter, the defendant put the victim's body in plastic bags and buried it in the nearby woods under a pile of branches. Christine next led authorities to her baby's body and was thereafter arrested. While awaiting trial, Christine is allowed to attend her daughter's funeral. She was shackled, walked in through the mourners, and she knelt down by Aliza's casket. Her former boyfriend, Kevin, would sit down next to her and help her through this moment. She looks at Kevin and says, "Why couldn't she just lay down that night and go to sleep?" A corrections officer standing behind Christine hears this and reports back to the judge. Christine Lane was convicted of second-degree manslaughter. She received 15 years to life, and she was released from prison in the year 2000. Christine Lane moved out of Dryden a free woman. This small town, once defined by its close-knit community, is now gripped by a fear that no one could escape. It is the summer of 1993. Best friends Kirsten Clark and Colleen Mama are excited. They are in their early 20s. It is summer. They are going to get their first apartment away from home. There's only one problem. Colleen has a boyfriend named Paul Jackson, and Colleen starts thinking that she's getting a little sick of Paul Jackson's shit. She wants to break up with Paul. The only problem is Paul can start sensing that Colleen is over him. Colleen, Kirsten, Paul, and a man named Scott Hume were always hanging out together. And Paul could sort of sense that Colleen was getting a little too close to Scott. It is August 14th, 1993. Colleen and Kirsten are going to go out on the town. They're going to the local bar called the Dryden Hotel. They walk in and they see Paul sitting there at the bar by himself, looking depressed and having a drink. So the girls decide, let's leave. We don't want any issues with Paul. The two girls go back to their apartment, and Paul is still in his feelings, upset. He cannot let it go that Colleen has moved on. According to court documents, after Colleen broke off her relationship with Paul Jackson, she began seeing Scott Hume. On August 14th, 1994, Paul Jackson went to Colleen's apartment in the village of Dryden, Tompkins County. He was carrying a kitchen knife. Paul walked through the unlocked apartment door. He encountered Scott Hume sitting on the couch, and Paul began to stab him through the heart, causing his death. Kirsten Clark witnessed the entire incident. Paul did not respond to her. He did not try to hurt her. He just ran out of the apartment. Only a few hours later, Paul would turn himself in to police. He would show up at the police department with his father and his brother, and all he would say to police is, I stabbed him, just put me in my prison cell." An indictment charged the defendant with various counts of murder in the second degree, assault in the first degree, burglary in the first degree, and criminal possession of a weapon in the fourth degree. At trial, Paul Jackson was convicted of murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the first degree, and he was sentenced to concurrent prison terms of 15 years to life. Paul Jackson spent 20 years in prison. He has been free since 2014. He moved back to Dryden, and today he is a family man with a wife and a son. In the docuseries Village of the Damned, Paul Jackson is interviewed by producers. He tells them that he does remember Kirsten Clark looking up at him during the stabbing, and he says, I had a brief thought that, yeah, I would stab her. Just to say it again, Paul Jackson is a free man. All that rage, all that jealousy, all of your ego controlling you, and for what? You would have been over the girl in a couple of months. You would have moved on. But now Scott Hume loses his life because Paul Jackson couldn't get his jealousy under control. But Paul gets a fresh start and a new lease on life. One year after Scott Hume's murder, December 30th, 1994, the town of Dryden is struck again. And this time it is by a boy named Jonathan Merchant, otherwise known as JP. JP was charming, persuasive, and sometimes JP was just a little too controlling. He was voted best dressed in his high school, and he had a girlfriend named Sherry Fitz. He convinced Sherry that he knew what was best for her, even if it meant limiting her freedom or making decisions for her, and slowly Sherry started to lose herself in JP. It wasn't immediately obvious. At first, the small things seemed harmless, his subtle jealousy when she talked to other guys or even her friends, demanding to know where she was and what she was doing. And this is something that Sherry thought was sweet at first. She thought it meant that he cared, but JP was just your basic love bomber. Sherry and JP had only started dating in junior year, so you can imagine how Sherry wasn't really able to recognize what was going on. High school love can be a tricky motherfucker. Sherry had a best friend named Jennifer Lung. Jennifer was interviewed by the docuseries Village of the Damned. Jennifer says that Sherry and JP had only been dating about 7 months, but they were going to the junior prom together, and the two girls were really excited, so they were out all day shopping for their gowns. When they returned home to Jennifer's house, Sherry asked if she could use the landline really quick and call someone. Sherry seemed worried, nervous, anxious. Once she hung up the phone, she said, "I have to go," and just seemed very flustered and quickly left Jennifer's home. That night, while Jennifer was babysitting, she finds out that her best friend Sherry had died by suicide. Sherry had been out shopping all day for prom with her best friend. Sherry even set up college tours with Jennifer and seemed excited about the future. Everyone is so confused by this news. But the thought does pop up. Did this have something to do with JP? And in 1991, stories start to surface about JP. 3 years pass. It is now 1994. JP is a 20-year-old college student, and he is dating the daughter of the high school football coach, Starr. College student JP is dating Amber Starr, a high school senior and daughter of Starr, who was a great family man, a wonderful coach, beloved in the community. Students at Dryden High School look up to Stephen. They look up to him as a father figure. Stephen's first priority was always his family. His family, his students, football. Stephen was an all-around amazing man. That is why in the fall of 1994, Stephen is starting to get worried for his daughter Amber. Amber has decided to break it off with JP. And JP is not taking it well. He starts stalking Amber. Now, this is a college guy. He is showing up at the Dryden High School practices. Amber's a cheerleader. She's at cheerleading practice, and here comes JP just sitting in the gym watching her in front of everyone. Soon, Stephen finds out that Jonathan is there. He runs into the gym. He tries to talk to JP. Let him know, listen, man, you're gonna get over her. Just let's move on, and you gotta stop coming to this high school. You are not allowed to be in here. There is no rationalizing with JP. Not only is he not going to stop stalking her, but it is going to get so bad that Stephen starts talking to his friends who are actually in the police department and asking for their advice. Court documents would later say on September 21st, 1994, plaintiff Amber Starr, then a senior in high school, advised Jonathan Merchant JP, a college student, that she no longer wished to be his girlfriend and would not date him in the future. For the next 3 months, JP Merchant's attempts to resurrect his relationship with Amber Starr progressed from annoying to threatening. The Starr family's responses likewise progressed from polite requests that he desist to demands that he do so. Nevertheless, JP Merchant persisted, telephoning the Starr residence at all hours of the day and night, and on occasion, personally contacting Amber in various places. Finally, on December 27, 1994, Amber and her mother Judith went to the Cortland County Sheriff's Department. Amber's mother gave depositions to Deputy Sheriff Donald Warner, but as they were finishing this process, to the surprise of all of them, JP Merchant calls the sheriff's department and said he heard that the sheriff might be looking for him, and he agreed to come in. When JP arrived to the police department, he was arrested for aggravated harassment and taken before a local magistrate who set bail. On December 28, 1994, JP's mother posted bail and he was released from jail. This is a fact that the Starrs only learned that very afternoon. At 10 p.m. on December 28th, Amber returns with her mother to the police department, and she brings her new boyfriend. This is where Amber gives her written statement concerning Merchant's conduct up to December 27th, 1994. Only a few days later, after going down to the police department, trying to file reports, trying to get a restraining order on this man, December 30th, 1994, in the early morning hours around 8 a.m., J.P. Merchant enters the Starr home with a gun. J.P. first heads to Amber's sister's room. He tries to get in. Her sister shuts the door, and she stays in her room. It is at this point J.P. goes down the hall to Amber's room, wakes her up, has the gun pointed at her face, tells her to get up and get out of the room. He is following behind her with the gun pointed to her back. That is when Stephen Starr jumps out in front of him, pushes his daughter Amber, and tells her to run. Stephen Starr is first shot in the rib cage, and then next he is shot in the head. He stood between JP and his daughter, and he died protecting his family. Stephen Starr, who was known not just for his leadership on the football field, but for his deep connection with his players and his role in shaping the lives of countless students, was suddenly and violently taken from the community that he loved. The fear began to seep into the very fabric of the community. People started locking their doors early, even installing extra security measures. But the sense of safety that had once defined this town seemed to slip further away each day. And it did not help that J.P. Merchant was on the run and no one knew where this man was. JP's vehicle was later spotted at the local cemetery in Homer, New York. JP Merchant killed himself next to the grave of his ex-girlfriend, Sherry Fitz, further raising questions in the community as to whether or not JP Merchant had something to do with the death of Sherry. As the community continues to grapple with its fear and uncertainty, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about stopping crime. It was about restoring the sense of safety, trust, and belonging that once defined this town. And would Dryden ever be able to reclaim their sense of safety? It is starting to become clear that most of these tragedies that the town is experiencing revolve around the local high school, Dryden High. In September 1996, the darkness deepens over Dryden High School. Next week on part 3 of The Dark Days of Dryden, New York, we will tell the story of high school cheerleaders, young, bright, and full of promise, who become the next victims of this town's dark curse. The darkness deepens over Dryden High. The curse that has plagued this town for decades is not finished. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Residue. I appreciate you all so very much. Residue is created, hosted, researched, written, and edited by Chrissy Champagne. That's me. If you enjoyed the show, the best way to help out Residue is to leave a 5-star review or just share with your friends and family. You can also follow me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, Facebook at Residue A True Crime Podcast, and TikTok at Residue Podcast. And please don't forget to hit that follow button wherever you listen to Residue. That way you'll know when to meet us back here every Tuesday. Can't wait to hang out with you all again. I hope you have a very safe and happy new year. Don't forget, stay safe and stay paranoid.